This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Recording in progress.
Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem. Bershus, Rabbi Goldberger, do you want me to begin or do you want to?
All yours. Go for it.
Okay. Good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll tell you, I'll speak more about it at the end, but I myself began Daf HaShavua a couple of years ago. I was giving a lot of shiurim, and I wasn't sure how to give a Gemara shiur. Daf Yomi was going to be too much. I couldn't prepare a blot every day. And I was already giving a Gemara shiur once or twice a week. And Daf HaShavua was starting a new Masechta. And I figured, look, I probably could do a blot a week. It's probably not a big deal. But I said to myself, how are we ever going to cover any ground? And here we are a couple years later. We did Be'ah, Tainis, Megillah, Moed KATAN, Chagiga, Rosh Hashanah I skipped, and so we did 7 Masechtas already. And many people in our Chabura, I think in the first Masechta we did, we figured, okay, we're doing a blot a week, we could chazer. So many people chazer it twice, 3 times, and every Masechta we do, people see, in order to know something, you really have to chazer it many, many times. And we had people in our Chabura that chazered Yivamis more than 10 times. And it really becomes very sweet. You take a blot, and after you learn the blot, that week, it really does not take a long time to chazer. You could chazer it many, many times. And you put it in your back pocket, and you really make a kinyan on it. So I'm a very big fan of Daf HaShavua. Me personally, it's the only way to go. It's the only way really to have any retention. Not just retention, but understanding something. If you're in yeshiva and you have 10 hours a day, okay, maybe you could do a blot a day. But if it's just a seder, a certain amount of time every day, it's really an amazing way to go. You'll see in no time you'll be covering Masechtas, and it's something that gives a person a lot of sipuk. Okay, so by way of intro, I want to begin with a very, let's call it an unusual question. Actually, I just saw last night that the Chassam Sofer, when he was a young boy, he asked this question to his Rabbi, the Hafla. There's a Medrash. The Medrash says there are 4 individuals. They all began their speech with a certain word. And because they began with this certain word, they had a downfall. And that word is af. Aleph Pei. Af. 4 people, the Medrash said, began their speech with the word af, and they had a downfall. Who are they? Number 1, the Nachash. The Nachash said, af ki amar leikim. God said, don't eat from all the trees. He started with af, and that's it. His legs were cut off, and he stepped on, and he eats the dirt. So that was the first person who started off his speech on a wrong note. I always say, if you get up to speak at a Sheva Bracha or something, the worst way to start is, I'm really not a speaker. Now, if you're not a speaker, pal, get down and let somebody else speak. Don't torture everybody. That I would call the second worst way to start a drasha. The worst way, af. You never want to start with your drasha with the word af. Who's the second person? The oifeh, the baker, the sar ha'oifeh. They have the sar ha'mashkim and the sar ha'oifeh. So the sar ha'oifeh hears that Yosef interprets the dream well for the sar ha'mashkim. So he says, af bacha loy mi. And we know what happened to him. Who else? Koirach. Koirach af el eretz loy havi. Korach began his drasha with the word af. The next thing we know, the ground is swallowing Koirach. And also Haman. Af loy hevi Esther hamaka. So Haman begins his drasha with the word af. All these people began with af, and they had a very bad downfall. So it's brought in the Sefer. You have it on your screen, or I'm telling you, it's in the Sefer Shemen HaTov, which is somewhat of a rare Sefer, in the name of Reb Shmelka of Nikolsburg. Why do we have a parak in Kesubos? The 5th parak of Kesubos begins with the word af. mean, after all that, the last way you want to begin any parak in Shas is the word af, and here the 5th parak of Kesubos begins with the word af, parak af alpi. And again, I saw last night that the Chassam Sofer also asked this question, and he gave an amazing answer. He says that it's Yadua, we have a tradition that Masechta Kesubos, the Kadmonim call it Shas KATAN. Okay, so this is not just like an expression that you heard in yeshiva. It's not just something people say. Well, Kesubos is very lamdish Masechta. You have Sfek Sveika and Bari Veshema, and you have Sheva Brachas, and you have Psikresh Nichale. No. This is an idea brought in the Kadmonim that somehow Kesubos encapsulates Kol HaTorah Kula. It's called Shas KATAN. By the way, it's interesting. Kesubos has something like 111 blot. 111 is always associated with Einoid Movadai. Why Einoid Movadai? The Svarim say Einoid Movadai is Rashi Tevis. Aleph, Ayin, Mem. 111. Or 111. Absolute unity. One. So the Torah, of course, is Yichud Hashem. So Kesubos, which is Shas KATAN, has 111 blot. The ultimate unity. The hallmark of unity. So therefore, Kesubos has 111 blot. Okay, so what is Torah? Says Rabbi Shmuel of Nikolsburg. Torah is Yud Gimel Midos Torah Nidreshes Bahem. Torah are the 13 principles through which the Torah is darshaned. In English we call it 13 principles of hermeneutic exegesis. But the Yud Gimel Midos Torah Nidreshes Bahem. But it's very interesting. We begin Shachris in the morning. We say a brayso of Rabbi Shmuel, B'shloisha esrei midos haTorah nidreshes bahem. Right? We say these 13 midos. Why are we reciting Yud Gimel midos haTorah nidreshes bahem as we're about to daven Shachris? We're not about to learn Gemara. If we're going to learn Gemara, I can understand. Before you open up your Gemara, you're going to say Rabbi Shmuel oimer b'shloisha esrei midos haTorah nidreshes bahem. But we're about to daven. The answer is, and the Bnei Yissaschar discusses the idea from the Maggid of Mezrich, and by the way, the Malbim in his Sefer Eretz Chemda, in Parshas Behaloischa, they both reveal an amazing idea that Torah, Yud Gimel Midos, Shatar Nidreshes Bahem, correspond to Yud Gimel Midos Harachamim, 13 principles of mercy. And each midah shaton reshem is me'oirer, it arouses, it awakens a different midas harachamim. So it comes out, somebody needs rachamim. So the best way to get rachamim is to learn Shas. The best way to elicit rachamei shamayim is to learn Torah Sheba'al Peh. Because each midah shaton reshes bahem corresponds to Yud Gimel midas harachamim. Says Rabbi Shmuel of Nikolsburg, if Kesubos is, so to speak, the microcosm of Kol HaTorah Kula, it's Shas KATAN. How many prakim should Kesubos have? 13. And lo and behold, haloi davarhu, Kesubos has 13 prakim. Kineged Yud Gimel Midos Harachamim. So now let's count the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim. According to the Arizal, it goes like this. We don't count Hashem. Kel, Rachum, V'chanun, Erech, Apayim, Af. The 5th Midah of Rachamim is God's patience. Therefore corresponding to the 5th Midah of Rachamim, the 5th parak of Kesubos, says Rav Shmuel of Nikolsburg, is Af al Pi. As if by learning that parak, it causes the Rebbeinu Shalom to be more patient with Klal Yisrael. So it's really an amazing einfall that Kesubos is microcosm of Kol HaTorah Kula. Kol Torah is Yud Gimel Midas Shaton Nidreshes Bahem. Dahainu Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim. Right? The Bnei Yissaschar brings from the Maggid that Moshe Rabbeinu davened for Miriam, he was mispalel, Kael na rafa nala. He was trying to be ma'ira, the midah of Kael. So Hashem says, you want to be ma'ira, the midas rachma of Kael, then you need to learn the corresponding midah shatoira nidreshes behem, which is kal v'chomer. Hashem makes kal v'chomer. Ve'aviha yaroik yarak b'faneha halois tikalem shivas yamim tikalem shivas yamim. So here, this is really an amazing discovery of Rav Shmuel of Nicholsburg. The fifth parak of Kesubos says Afal Pi, because it's ma'oirer, the erech hapayim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In fact, it's very interesting. In a friend of mine, Joe Talansky, I believe his name is, showed me in Reb Zilberstein's Sefer Chashukei Chemed. Somebody asked Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein if somebody wants to work on the midah of kas. Could the Rabbi Yitzchak suggest a limud to help a person improve in the area of kas? So Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein cited this Shemen HaTov of Rav Shmuel of Nicholsburg, that if you want to work on the midah of kas, then learn Masechta Kesubos, especially Perek Afalpi. That there's a special segula in Perek Afalpi to work on one's kas. By the way, just as a brief tangent, we have at the end of Parshas Bereshis, V'noyach matzachein be'inei Hashem. So the whole world is going down. The whole world is being destroyed. And there's one man standing. Why? He's matzachein be'inei Hashem. What did he do? What exactly was it about Noach that he was matzachein be'inei Hashem? It's amazing. The Sefer Charedim of Rabbi Elazar Askiri, Rabbi Elazar Askiri was a contemporary of the Arizal. He writes that the Torah doesn't say exactly why Noach was matzachim bein Hashem. It must be that we could see why he found favor in the word Noach. And that is, Noach, he didn't get angry. He was a calm person. It says Noach 3 times. He was Noach b'diburai, Noach b'hiluchai, v'Noach b'maasav. And while the rest of the world was corrupt, and really be'etzem, Noach also deserved to be punished with them, the Charedim writes, the reason he was matzachin is because he didn't get angry, which is a very startling idea. We talk about kas, and in our value system, we always talk about, of course, you have to daven with a minyan, and you have to learn every day, and you have to learn with Eon, and you have to kashrus, of course, and sometimes midos get thrown under the rug. And here, this is a very powerful example of here. The reason why this was the last man standing was because he worked on himself, that he didn't lose his cool. Okay, let's proceed over here. There's a very interesting remez in the first 4 words of Masechta Kesubos. Besula Niseis Liyom Haravi. The Ben Yoyada Masechta Sanhedrin says, Besula Niseis Liyom Haravi, Rashi Tevois, Levana. Levana. So Rashi Tevois, the moon. Okay, yeah, good. What are you going to do with that? But that's what the Ben Yehoyada brings down. In a Tshuva Sefer, and one of the descendants, let's see, you have it on the sheet. It's called Shas Tshuva's Zichroin Soifrim, which is a Sefer on Masechta Yevamos. He brings that the Chasam Sofer as well would speak about the remez. Here, I have it. I blew it up for you. Besula Niseis Liyom Haravi Rashi Tevois Levana. What's the connection between the moon and Besula Niseis Liyom Haravi? There's a minhag that many people have, that they only get married in the first part of the month as the moon is getting bigger, but they don't get married at the end of the month. Remember, actually I could say, today's my anniversary, so I'll say, Beis Cheshvan. We were going to get married after Sukkot, but the Shver said, you get married only in the beginning of the month, when the moon is B'chidusha, not at the end of the month. It's such a minhag. It's brought in the Ramah. So Chasam Sofer says, a remez to the minhag is Besula Niseis Liyom Haravi Levana, the moon. In other words, we only get married when the moon is becoming bigger. Just between me and you, the Hafla says this is not a correct minhag. Should not be makbid on it. The Ramah, because he asks the stira in the Ramah. The Ramah says that by Shabbos, the Mechaber says don't get married after Rosh Chodesh Av. The Ramah adds, don't get married after Shabbos B'Tammuz. Asks the Hafla in his Hagoyis and Shulchan Aruch, what do you mean don't get married after Shabbos B'Tammuz? You're not going to get married after Shabbos B'Tammuz anyway, because it's the end of the month. Why would the Ramah have to argue and add to the Mechaber? The Mechaber says don't get married after Rosh Chodesh. Oh, the Ramah says don't get married after Shabbos B'Tammuz. You can't get married then anyway. Says the Hafla, when the Ramah in Yoredeus says the minhag is not to get married in the second half of the month, that just means people don't do it. It doesn't, but it's not correct. So the Ramah has to add, and the Hafla is medayik. There's a difference between noihagin and nohagu, where nohagu may mean people do it, but it's not necessarily correct. Noihagin means you should do it l'charchila. By the way, look in Kesubos on I believe Dalet Amud Beis, where the Gemara makes a similar diuk, that there's a difference between noihagin and nohagu. Okay, let's proceed. So we have this remez of Levana. So, but it's interesting. Another aside. Rav Nachman of Breslov writes that if somebody's looking for a shidduch, he says a segula to find a zivug is to say Kiddush Levana b'kavana. Reb Chaim Falaji writes the same thing. He says, why? What does Kiddush Levana have to do with finding a zivug? He says, Besula Nisses Liyoim Haravi is Rashi Tevois Levana. So, but others say, I think I put this on the sheet, the Shelas Yaakov brings, here's another segula to find the shidduch. They say, learn Masechta Kesubos. Masechta Kesubos is a shidduch to find, is a segula to find the shidduch. Okay, so you have two options. You could either say Kiddush Levana b'kavana, or you could learn Kesubos be'iyon. Either one is a segula. Okay, we're still by way of introduction. I do want to get to a lamdasha point, but I want to share the following with you. The Chida wrote a perush on SHAS. It's called Pesach Einayim. And the Chida has a wondrous drasha that he gave as a hakdama to Masechta Kesubos, and he begins by citing Rama Mipano. Rama Mipano is Rabbi Menachem Azaria of Pano. Rabbi Menachem Azaria of Pano was one of the great Italian Mekubalim, and wants to know what's the deeper reason why Chazal recommend to get married on Wednesday, on B'yom Haravi. Okay, now what we say now doesn't mean you have to say over at the Shabbos table. I'm just telling you what the Chida says. You know, lots of luck trying it, but here it goes. What happened on Wednesday? If we're supposed to get married on Wednesday, that means there's a limud in the Yom Haravi, that's something we need to take out of Yom Ravi to apply to a marriage. So we know on Yom Ravi, the Rebbe Shem created the Shemesh and the Yareach, and they were equal. And they were just sitting around. And they were just there. Sun and moon. And there were no toilados. There were no other offspring. Until one of them realized, well, wait a second. You can't have two leaders. You can't have two people in the highest position of power. So what did the Rebbe Shem do? The Rebbe Shem made the moon small. Oh, and then all of a sudden the stars came. All of a sudden they're stars. Says the Chida, same thing with Abraham and Sarah. Abraham and Sarah were originally like the sun and the moon. Two great personalities. The problem is when you have two great personalities, there won't be any offspring. Vashem pakad es Sarah, says the Chida. Hashem diminished Sarah. He was mamayit Sarah like he was mamayit the Levana. And all of a sudden Yitzchak was born. Says the Chida, in the name of Rama Mipano, the reason why we get married on Wednesday is we're telling the Chassan and Kala, if you both think you could have two captains, this is not a recipe for success over here. You need to learn the lesson of the Shemesh and the Yareach, that efshar l'shnei malachim sheishtamshu b'keser echad. So therefore we remind them there's got to be a Shemesh and there needs to be miyud halavana. And when there's a shemesh and a miyud halavana, then be'ezus Hashem, you'll have koichavim. Again, don't say this over at the Shabbos. I'm just letting you know what the Chidah says. That's the reason why we get married on Wednesday. He even says, that's the deeper meaning, matzah or moitza. Matzah, the nakuda, the kamat, is under. When it's matzah, when the isha recognizes that she's under, then there's success. When she's a choilam and she puts herself on top, then it's moitza ni mar mimaves. Now, he even says, the ish has a greater gematria than the isha. Ish is, but when it's umoitzani marmi mav, it says ha-isha. When the woman wants to put in the hay and be on equal gematria with him, that's when there's trouble. Okay, so therefore, besula nisis liyam Rabbi, because we tell them, you want to have successful offspring, we have to understand, I remember I used to hear from Rav Miller many times, there are no two captains. There's a captain and there's a first mate. Now the captain has to treat the first mate with great honor and respect, but these are the two positions. So I left it at that. So I was always bothered, on Daf Beis in Kesubos. The Gemara has a kasha. The Gemara asks, Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Mibnei ma amru besula nisas yam Ravi. Why they say, because we learned in a Braisa that if the time of the 12 months comes and he doesn't marry her, she could eat from his assets. However, if it's not Wednesday yet, it's not time to get married. So the Gemara has a kasha. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Morei de Avram, master of Avraham. What kind of answer is that? That's the reason you get married on Wednesday? The Mishnah says why you get married on Wednesday. So that in case he could go early to Bezdin if he finds she's not a basula. So it was always, what's the lashon of Morei de Avram? You ever see that? You ever see in the whole Shas where an Amoira expresses incredulously, Morei de Avram. What's Morei de Avram? Says the Chidah, this is a raya to the Ramami Pano, that the whole reason to get married on Wednesday is to remember the sun and the moon, is to remember Vashem Pakad Sarah. Remember, Avram and Sarah only had offspring. Vashem Pakad. So you're going to give a wrong reason for Basula Nisas Yam Ravi, master of Avraham. Don't you, Morei de Avram, don't you remember the reason for Basula Nisas Ravi is because of Avraham and Sarah? It's a very interesting Josh Lechidat. Now, this is all Maruma's Besula Nises Liyoim Haravi Rashi Tevos Levana. Remember the moon. Levana, remember the moon. So let's go to the first Taisus. The first Taisus asks, why does it say Besula? It should say Ha Besula, just like in the beginning of Kedushin. It says Ha'isha Niknis. Why does it say Besula? It should say Ha Besula, just like it says Ha'isha Niknis or Hayavama Niknis. So Taisus says, well, by Isha and Kedushin, it's going on the Isha in the pasuk ki yikach ish isha. So it's going on a definitive woman. It says ha-isha. But there's no definitive besula, so it says besula. So I heard from Moshe Aaron Friedman that al pi drush, there's a very pashut answer to Tosfos' question. The Mishnah needs to be merames levana, lamed beis nun hey. So we have to say besula, not ha-besula. Otherwise, you ruin the whole drasha. Okay, so let's move on to a lamdisha point. Okay, let's move on to the third Tosfos. We'll start with Rashi. Rashi says, why does the Basula get married on Wednesday? In case he lives with her, and he discovers that she is not a Basula, so he'll go to Bezdin, Rashi says. This is the last Rashi on the Mishnah. Rashi says, "Umitoich sheyavoy lebezdin yizbarer hadavar." By going to Bezdin, the matter will become clear. Kishayatza hakoil, when the rumor spreads that the husband suspects she's not a basula, maybe Eidim will come and Eidim will say, "Yeah, Taka, she was mazana tachtav, she was mazana baratzain." That's what Rashi learns. Rashi learns that basula gets married on Wednesday because we need him to go to Bezdin. And if a basula will get married on, let's say, on Tuesday, so we know Bezdin sits on Monday and Thursday. So if the basula is going to get married on on Tuesday, let's say, so he'll live with her. He might discover she's not a basula, but by the time Bezdin convenes, he'll cool off, and he'll say, you know what, I'll stick it out with her. So we don't want him to cool off. He lives with her Wednesday night, and then Thursday morning, they go to Bezdin. So Tosfos is bothered by the following question. Tosfos asks, what do you mean he'll go to Bezdin? What exactly are we going to find out? If she's not a basula, says Tosfos, I understand, let's say, for example, she's the wife of a kohen. So there's the wife of the kohen, and if we in fact find out that she's not a basula, it could be she had relations with somebody before he did erisin to her, and in that case she'll be mutter. And it could be she had relations after erisin, and we know that the wife of a kohen, if she was violated even ba'onis, is asur to her husband. So by Eshes kohen, I understand, we need to make sure that this woman is a basula, because if she's not a basula and she had relations with somebody, it's a suffix daraisa, she might be asur to him. But Tosfos says, by a regular woman, big deal. Let's say she's not a basula. She's still mutter to him, because it's a svek sveika. This is basically daf tes. Tosfos is invoking the famous daf tes, that if she's a regular woman, so let's think about the possibilities. First of all, she may have been violated before erisin, and in that case, she's definitely mutter to him. And even if she lost her basulim after erisin, but she was violated. Maybe it was not beratzain. And if a married woman had relations with somebody against her will, if she's not an Eshes kohen, she's mutter to her husband. So what exactly are we worried about? Even if she's not a basula, she'll still be mutter to her husband because of what we call svek sveika. Rashi says, well, we still have to figure out what happened over here. Very nice, it's a svek sveika, but we still have to clarify and figure out exactly what happened. Tosfos is bothered. No, we have a heter of svek sveika. So Tosfos answers that if she's a kohen, Eshes kohen, it's only one suffix, and therefore we need to be mesakein that Eshes kohen gets married on Wednesday. And once we're mesakein Eshes kohen gets married on Wednesday, then agav the Eshes kohen will be mesakein for all women. Rashi, on the other hand, does not have to come on to Eshes kohen. Rashi says that we're mesakein for all women that they get married on Wednesday, and Rashi doesn't seem to want to rely on svek sveika. So the Chasam Sofer says, what exactly is machlokes Rashi and Tosfos over here? Chasam Sofer writes, this is not in the regular Chasam Sofer al SHAS, it's in Chasam Sofer HaShalem. He says, Rashi's shita is that you're right, there's a svek sveika over here. But how could you rely on svek sveika when you could be mevarer? You could clarify, you could figure out what happened exactly, what went on. So Rashi's of the opinion, granted there's a svek sveika, but a svek sveika she'efshar levarer, you're mechuyev to be mevarer. You have to clarify, you have to figure out what happened. On the other hand, Rabbeinu Tam holds, you don't have to be mevarer. If you have a svek sveika, even if it's efshar levarer, you don't have to be mevarer. Grada, Chasam Sofer writes, that Shitas Rabbeinu Tam in Shas, that a svek sveika, you don't have to be mevarer. So Rabbeinu Tam is going l'shitase, that when you have a svek sveika, you don't have to be mevaret. And therefore Tosfos is forced to say, the reason why we get married, the woman gets married on Wednesday, is for the Eshes kohen. And Rashi doesn't have to come on to Eshes kohen. Rashi holds this is a svek sveika, that it's efshar levara, you need to be mevaret. If you look in the Tshuvas Kesubos Sofer says he found in the writings of his father that the machlokes Rashi and Tosfos is, do you need to be mevarer a svek sveika? And he says, truth be told, it's not so pasha just to say that Rabbeinu Tam holds that that Rabbeinu Tam is going l'shitase that you don't have to be mevarer svek sveika, because Kesubos Sofer says Rabbeinu Tam in all likelihood would only say you don't have to be mevarer svek sveika when it's a tircha to be mevarer the svek sveika. Would you say in this case it's a tircha to be mevarer the svek sveika? A tircha, go to Bezdin, And as Rashi says, a kol will go out, and maybe Eidim will come. It's not a big deal. Only by Safek Jerusa, the Ksav Sofer says, would Rabbeinu Tam say you don't have to be mevar the Sfek Sveika. So the Ksav Sofer sort of redefines. He says, perhaps in this case, Rabbeinu Tam would say you have to be mevar a Sfek Sveika of this type. However, Rabbeinu Tam says, why do we have to be mesakein that a man should get married on Wednesday? Because we're afraid if he going to get married on Tuesday, he's going to cool off, and he's not going to be mevar the Sfek Sveika. Who says? Who says there's such a big chashash that the guy will cool off? Maybe he'll do his due diligence and he'll go to Bezdin. No, we have to make a takana because we're very afraid that the man won't be mevar the Sfek Sveika. Says the Ksav Sofer, could be Rabbeinu Tam holds a Sfek Sveika like this. You do have to be mevar. But we're not choishesh to be miskulei hai ve'ulai, that we have to make a takana to get married on a Thursday, because in the interim the guy will cool off and he won't be mevar the Sfek Sveika. But just to conclude, you could say the flip side. I believe the Chemda Shloimeh writes, even lefi the shitais, that typically you don't have to be mevar the Sfek Sveika. In this case, you would be. In other words, even those who would typically say you don't have to be mevar a Sfek Sveika may agree to Rashi in this case that you would have to be mevar, and for one of two reasons. Number one, because if he is going to stay married to her, they are going to be living be'isser kol yamehem. Maybe when do we say you don't have to be mevar a Sfek Sveika? Okay, it's a piece of meat, so eat it. Worst comes to worst, not kosher. Yay, okay, you did one avera. But to have husband and wife stayed together la'ol meyad because they were mevar Sfek Sveika, that we can't do. And one other svar the Chemda Shloimeh says is, legabe him it's a Sfek Sveika. But she knows what happened. She knows if it was before the Erusin or during the Erusin. She knows if it was unexpressed. So legabe her, it's not a Sfek Sveika. So it could be Rashi holds you have to be mevar the Sfek Sveika because legabe the Isha, it's Yadua. You can't rely, Sfek Sveika, I don't have to be mevarer. For him it's a Sfek Sveika. For her it's not a Sfek Sveika. Okay, Rabbi say that's just Lamaisa, a very small taste of one little pocket here in Kesubos, Machlokes Rashi Tosfos. You'll do the sugya of Mesachraisa de Nazaisa, Mesachraya de Nazaisa, Psik Rachel Nichale, between the Machlokes Rabbeinu Tam the Aruch and the Ri. Just to conclude, it's really a wonderful initiative to take upon yourself Daf HaShavua. In my humble opinion, it's something that will give you tremendous sipuk, and you can really make a kinyan. The program, the way we do it in our shul, Monday night we do an amud, Tuesday night we do an amud, we chazer it on Shabbos, we have a shiur, chazar on Shabbos, and then Sunday morning we have an iyun shiur. We pick one little pocket on the blot, sometimes 40 minutes, sometimes 10 minutes, but just that on every blot, you dig in somewhere. It's always like the Medrash says the Torah is nimshala l'te'ena. Torah is compared to a fig tree. It's interesting. There are three opinions in the Medrash. What was the Eitz Hadas? Was it chita? Was it gefen? Was it te'ena? And Ben Yoyada says it was all three. Shalish pamim tachayg, te'ena, chita, gefen. And the three regalim correspond to the three fruits of the Eitz Hadas. He doesn't say what corresponds to what. So, some suggest that you also have a fourth possibility. You have the esrog, right? The Medrash says the esrog. So some say, well, the esrog corresponds to Sukkos, and the yayin corresponds to Shmini Atzeres, which is regal b'fnei atzmai. Perhaps that's the reason for the minhag of drinking yayin on Simchas Torah. And Pesach corresponds to Tvua, so you have the matzah. And Shavuos corresponds to Te'ena. Kabbalah Satar corresponds to Te'ena. The Medrash asks, Lama nimshal Torah la Te'ena. Why is Torah compared to Te'ena? The Medrash says something very simple. Medrash says all other fruits, today, you look at the tree, nothing's ripe. Tomorrow you look at the tree, all the fruits are ripe. The Torah is not like that. Torah is compared to te'ina. Te'ina is the only fruit. Today, 2 fruits are ripe. Tomorrow, 2 fruits are ripe. The next day, 2 fruits are ripe. 2 at a time. Says the Medrash, so too when it comes to the Torah. A Tippish says, Masechta Kalim, it's 30 prakim, I'll never finish it. Nezikin, Baba Kama, Baba Metzia, Baba Basra, I'll never finish it. But the Chacham says, I don't have to finish it today. I can learn 2 halachas today, 2 halachas tomorrow, 2 halachas the next day, and in a short amount of time, it adds up to be a davar chashuv ma'od. And I think that's the side of Daf HaShavua. It might not be glamorous at first, but it has tremendous kiyum. It's a limud that you could really make a kinyan on the limud. It will really be mizdabek to the Torah. And I wish all of you tremendous bracha v'atzlacha. Thank you for the opportunity this morning. And Be'ezus Hashem, hope to hear good news that you make it through Kesubos, SHAS KATAN. You get through all 111 blat, which ultimately the goal of all the learning is to be makir, that Einoid Movadoi, 111. And bracha v'hatzlacha and agun Shabbos. Thank you very much.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Kol tov. Amen.
Thank you from Rabbi Goldberger.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I see. Can we see your face? You weren't able to. Oh, sorry. Okay, got it.
We can't see you, but
You can't see me?
No.
Why?
We see the marmakaimus that you were putting up.
I'm on the side here. You don't see?
No, we weren't able to see you.
Now you
Now
could?
we see you.
Oh, chaval.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.